Mr. Rohit Vyas, welcome again to ITV Gold. I hope you're doing well today.
Thank you.
Of course, we have you here as a senior political commentator, so let's dig right into politics. And my first question to you has to be one of the biggest news that came out from yesterday. The Electoral College has finally affirmed the Biden-Harris victory. So my first question to you has to be, this ceremony is a ritual which nobody usually talks about in most of the elections. But this year it became very, very important to see what the final decision was going to be. How are you looking at it?
Yeah, they tried to make it very transparent this year simply because there was a lot of misinformation that was being spread out there about the elections, namely that there was fraud involved, massive, widespread, calculated fraud, and all the rest of it, sent out there by Trump and the campaign. And they wanted to make sure the electors themselves, each of the states, decided let's make this an open, transparent process, so the people of America can see for themselves how well the system works, how well democracy works, and what exactly the Electoral College is supposed to do.
Right.
And that's why for the first time, the Electoral College votes, in my memory, I think this is the first time all the states' Electoral College votes being cast were telecast nationally on CNN. And I don't think that's ever happened before because it's not even considered anything significant.
Right.
It's a given after every election, and once an electoral race is called, the Electoral College process is a formality. But this time, it became a necessity to show to the American people exactly how the system works and who actually becomes the president of the United States.
Correct. And, President-elect Joe Biden addressed the nation last night after the decision was clear. What did you think of that? He again talked about it's time to heal America. It's time to come together. He basically gave a direct comment on President Donald Trump to concede again. How did you look at that?
He was actually, frankly, angry. I think Joe Biden said this is all a waste. Basically, was trying to convey the message, look, we wasted enough time, enough resources, enough energy of everyone on this whole business of trying to find fraud when there repeatedly hasn't been any. The courts, from the lower courts to the higher courts, all dismissed any of the legal challenges brought by the Trump campaign. And so he wanted to send a very clear message, I thought, to the Trump campaign. Right. Stop wasting the time of America. Let's get together now. Let's unite the country. Let's move forward with the business of governing, especially during a huge crisis that we have now, twin crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic fallout from it. And he was very clear about the fact that it's time to go ahead now. Let's get things in place, start cooperating, have the inauguration, and begin governing and getting our country back on track.
This brings me to a point where I'd like to discuss this. President Donald Trump has lost popular vote on November 3rd. He has then lost recounts of votes. Then he has lost many legal battles across the nation. And yesterday he lost the Electoral College. What should the Republican Party learn from this, and how should they be responding?
I don't think they're going to learn much from this. If anything, they're going to. And again, I'm bipartisan. I don't, but I can't help but laugh in response, only because I think they're not going to learn. All they're going to do, they might actually capitalize on some of these moves for future elections, where you challenge, you come out there and you challenge a count, or you challenge the presumption that someone has won, as opposed to you. They might actually use this a bit more in the future, I think. I doubt any lessons have been learned because don't forget 100 plus congressmen from the Republican Party sided with Trump. They signed the legal briefs, the legal documents to challenge the elections, and they went right ahead and did so. Also, I think they're not going to be doing too much in terms of learning or educating themselves because Donald Trump is still going to exercise enormous influence over the Republican Party for the next 4 years for certain.
While we're talking about this, today Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has congratulated President-elect Joe Biden on his victory. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that President Trump needs to take his cue from Leader McConnell, that it's time to end his term. How did you look at that? What kind of a message does it send across the nation when you have the Senate Majority Leader finally accept Biden as the winner?
Doesn't make much of a difference because, frankly, Mitch McConnell extended his hand of congratulations too late. He should have done so immediately after the election was called. That's the tradition. Frankly, I think Mitch McConnell doesn't look too good in the eyes of the majority that voted for Joe Biden. He could have made himself look really good by standing apart right from the beginning, but I think he hasn't. And that's going to go against him in the future, if not in the near term. It was really too late. It should have been much sooner. And he should have congratulated the president-elect a lot sooner. He now looks like he's not really going to be cooperative in the 4 terms that Joe Biden will be there with Kamala Harris. And that's some kind of bad foreboding for the country, because the fact that he took so long meant he had second thoughts, meant he wanted to sit in the sidelines, and he figured that something might happen the other way. And so it seems that the Republican Party, much of the Republican Party, and that's reflected in Mitch McConnell's late response, has been thinking much about itself, its own agenda. And each of the candidates of the Republican Party are thinking much about their own agenda, which actually every politician does,
Right.
but not on the scale as Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republicans have done so far.
What will the relationship with President-elect Biden and Mitch McConnell look like?
I hope it'll be good. I don't think so now. In the past, they've had very good relations. I think I've explained it to your viewers
Yeah.
that Biden especially has been able to reach across the aisle. He still will be able to reach across the aisle. I'm sure Mitch McConnell has tremendous regard for him, but Mitch McConnell and the Republicans have their own agenda. I don't think it's in their own interest to cooperate fully with Joe Biden. So, for instance, with the cabinet nominees, where confirmations are required by the Senate, it has to pass the Senate. Each of those cabinet appointees, most of them anyway, not some are not, do not require confirmation in the Senate, but those that do, I'm sure they're going to be raising obstacles for the Biden administration. So you're going to see a very tough operation going forward, a very tough governance going forward. And that's because everything Biden's going to want to do, if the majority still sits with the Senate, at that point, it's going to be very hard for him to carry on his own agenda. And the only thing he can depend upon is his own diplomacy within domestic politics here in the United States to reach out across the aisle and say, for instance, look, Mitch, we've got to do something about the American people who are suffering. We've got to do something about those who are now hungry for the first time in their entire lives. We've got to do something to bring relief to them, to small businesses, to the various states. Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. He's going to have a tough time. Biden's going to have a very tough time convincing Republicans that now he is the president of everyone, because the Republicans, it seems to me right now, are still focused on their own agenda. So it's going to be a tough 4 years ahead.
Yes, already a tough road. They still can't agree on a stimulus package. I can only imagine how that would be if the Senate is, Republican majority. While discussing a little bit more about it, and I ask you this question every single time, I have to ask you again, would President Trump concede ever? We're a couple of weeks away now from January 20th, and the Electoral College already declared the winner. What should President Trump be doing right now?
Now, you asked a question of will he concede ever? I don't think he will concede. I just don't think he'll concede, and he's not required to concede. It's a ceremony. It's normal protocol, if you will. It is a tradition, if you will. But there's nothing traditional about Donald Trump. So he's not going to concede. I don't expect him to. That's a prediction I'm making. I do not expect him to concede. It doesn't matter though, because he has lost. It's been proven over and over again since the election, through the court systems, through the political processes. He has been proven wrong. He has been proven lost. He is no longer going to be the president after noon on the 20th of January, 2021. And I think that'll be the end of it. So what is he going to do in the future? I think he's going to keep tweeting. I think he's going to keep on hammering away that this was a fraud election stolen from him. The carpet was pulled from under his feet, and unfairly so. And I think he will continue to hammer that message out and say he is the only way and he's the only future. And I still won't be surprised if on election day, on inauguration day, Donald Trump decides to hold a separate event and say he's going to run for president in 2024.
Yes, that's the news that we keep on hearing as well, that during the inauguration ceremony, which, mainly would be virtual for all of us because of the safety issues with COVID-19, that President Donald Trump may be hosting his own event. We were just talking about the Senate. Let's quickly talk about what's happening in Georgia right now. Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are challenging incumbent GOP Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Today, President-elect Joe Biden is visiting Georgia to campaign for the Democratic challengers. How are you looking at this race? And according to you, what issues are at stake during this election? What is going to matter in that Senate if it is flipped?
I think it's this race is basically critical for both parties. Even if the two seats do go to the Democrats, by the way, which we don't know, we have no idea, but if they do, there's still going to be a tie. Basically, the Senate's going to be equally balanced with 50 each. And there's going to be a tiebreaker vote, which Kamala Harris as vice president would exercise if they have to proceed with the Democratic and Joe Biden agenda. This race in Georgia, instead of being a local race now, has become a national race. Usually Senate races, in states, just like congressional races, are more dealing with local issues. This one has turned out to become a national debate. And it's going to be that way until the election day that comes up in January, the first week of January. And what's going to matter is what's going to be hanging in the balance is the future of the country entirely. So essentially, you've got these two races that are going to be interpreted as having national depth, rather than local Georgia depth. Georgia is just going to be the state which is going to be showcasing this, but it's going to have national implications as to the balance of power in the United States Senate.
Wow, yes. Georgia has been such a key player in this election, just became a swing state out of nowhere. Very interesting. While we are talking about politics, another breaking news that shocked everybody was Attorney General Barr's resignation, which is coming just a few weeks short of the inauguration day. Why is he deciding to resign right now? Just before the inauguration, just before basically the term of President Trump is going to be over. Why resign now, and what kind of a message do you think that sends?
I guess the message was very clear that he has lost the confidence of the President of the United States. President Trump has made it very clear that he is miffed, to say the least, at William Barr, because William Barr said very clearly early on, well, at least a few weeks ago, that the Justice Department found no evidence, absolutely no evidence of wrongdoing during the elections, of orchestrated fraud or any such thing. And once he said that, he was history, basically. I am surprised that he resigned before Donald Trump fired him. But I think he sort of knows Trump well enough to realize that it's a dead end now. And if he doesn't resign, he will be fired, which would be more humiliating. Because I do think William Barr has displayed a certain ego as well out there every time he's spoken. He is seen to display this ego, and I think that ego would have been seriously damaged had Donald Trump said, you're done, you're history, get out of here. So it was a bit late. I think he should have resigned sooner after having come to the conclusion that there was no orchestrated fraud, organized fraud during the election. And he should have quit sooner, but better late than never.
Do you think also the fact that he didn't tell President Donald Trump about the investigation going into Hunter Biden also impacted that resignation?
Excuse me?
Do you think the investigation that is going on into Hunter Biden and the fact that Attorney General Barr didn't tell President Trump about it, do you think that also impacted the resignation?
No, not really. I don't think so. I think Trump would have known about the investigation anyway. So I don't think that had anything to do with the resignation. Maybe, he might, I guess Donald Trump might have wanted to have some more advanced information about anything going on with Hunter Biden. If he didn't have any access to that, that would be a reason for him to be upset. But I don't think that specifically had anything to do with William Barr resigning and whether Trump was on the edge of trying to push him out.
Definitely, and it'd be interesting to see who the Attorney General would be under the Biden-Harris administration. Just discussing more with you, Rohit we're looking right now at vaccines. That's the biggest news for this week. Yesterday the first vaccine was given to a nurse in New York, and today, a nurse in New Jersey got her first vaccine as well. They are rolling out across the nation. Vaccine has been a political issue this whole year. How should we look at the vaccines right now? And what kind of a political issue is it going to cause in the next couple of months?
I think it's a very good piece of news we should all be celebrating. And as we speak, Moderna's vaccine has also been, cited by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, as being highly effective. And in fact, the Moderna vaccine, I've been reading from the FDA's agency report that it seems to even prevent, infections after the first dose is administered, which we didn't see in the Pfizer vaccine. So it seems like the Moderna vaccine, and both these vaccines use the same technology that fools the immune system into thinking that, all right, they're being attacked by the virus and immediately building a response to it when there is in fact, no virus. So that's very good news. I don't think it'll be a political issue. I do want to say that even now, besides the scientists, the pharma companies that did a splendid, superb job, we all have to be grateful to them for having done a fantastic job. Normally, I would not praise big pharma like this, but I think they came through, absolutely fantastically, and they should be praised for it. I would also applaud Donald Trump for having given this priority, for having set into motion Operation Warp Speed. I think that was a great decision, and I think for that, he does deserve credit. And I think enough people should give Donald Trump the credit for that politically, because it was a very, very critical decision to name it Operation Warp Speed, to give it that impetus, and to talk about it. So on that score, I think it's done well. I do not think there'll be any political issues as far as the vaccine goes.
But do you think it's important for President Donald Trump and President-elect Biden to take the vaccine? Do you think it's important for them to send that national message out?
Ideally, what I'd like to see is both Donald Trump and Joe Biden sitting together and being administered the vaccine. Wouldn't that send a fantastic message out there? Just think about it. The president, and the president-elect sitting together, all right, getting a vaccine. That would be a dream picture, a dream photo opportunity, and a dream moment in the history of the United States, in the history of world health.
Yes, for sure. When you're looking at vaccines, let's talk now a little bit more about the economy. How has the economy reacted to the news of vaccine? And a second question following up to that would be, again, about the stimulus package. What insight could you now give us about that?
Okay, the apparently a couple of bills are being mooted now by the bipartisan group. There was one bill earlier. Now they're presenting two bills. One is to bring direct relief to the people. And then there's another one, and to governments, state governments, local governments, etc., and to local businesses, to small businesses. And there's another bill that's going to deal with a number of other issues coming up, including the distribution of the vaccine, financing that, and all the rest of it. So I think the relief talks seem to be making some progress. This bipartisan group that was formed, the bipartisan group of senators, has been toiling day and night, from the information I've been gleaning from out there, to get this thing through. The fact is, the economy is not in good shape. Not if you don't look at the stock market. If you look at the stock market, you think, wow, the economy is booming. The stock market does not reflect the economic reality on the ground. It does not reflect what's happening on Main Street, which is the main street of every little town in America, every little state capital, et cetera, et cetera. So the stock market is one end of the economic spectrum. The stock market and those with the interests in the stock market and the big corporations will always have the money, no matter what. But it's the other side, the other end of the spectrum, which is a great majority of it, by the way, which is suffering. You have hunger in America like we have never seen before in our lifetimes. I don't think it happened in the Great Depression either. There are many, many, many millions of Americans now, millions, suffering food insecurity for the first time in their lives. Right. They are humiliated to go out there to get handouts. These are people who've been working all their lives, making money, bringing enough, if they're men or women, to the table at home to feed their children, now to be humiliated, feel humiliated for no fault of their own, to be unemployed, to have no money to feed themselves, having to go out and get handouts. That is a very sad, scary situation. I never thought I'd see that in the United States of America, and it's a reality now. So I think everyone has to think very clearly, look, we have an economic crisis. The Federal Reserve, by the way, did a superb job. Everybody acknowledges it. Jerome Powell, the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, has done a fantastic job of, bringing in the economic stimulus, etc., early on in the crisis. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, supported him in that effort.
Right.
So I think people have worked, and suddenly they're not because of political, partisanship. And I think it's just critical that all that be laid aside and they immediately come together to do something. I'm hopeful. The bipartisan group has been working on Capitol Hill to get something through before the Christmas break. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer from the Democratic side have said that if we have to work through Christmas, we're going to do it.
You know, while we're talking about this, parts of the nation are going into stay-at-home orders. We're hearing news even in the tri-state that there could be a possible shutdown. My question to you would be, what will be the impact on the economy, which is already suffering so much, worse than the Great Depression? What will happen to the economy then, and can we afford another shutdown?
No, we cannot afford another shutdown. And it's interesting you bring that up because you're out in New York. I'm here in New Jersey, and we're doing this interview at a distance, virtually, because we're both playing it safe. You are in the studio, and I worry for you, because even though you've taken all the precautions everybody does, I still worry about you. I know you folks worry about me. This is what we're going through in the tri-state. I'm here in New Jersey, you're out there in New York, and we don't want to see things shut down. New York has already closed its restaurants to indoor dining. A bad situation, I think, already. But lockdowns will become necessary if people do not understand the gravity of the situation we are in. And they do not seem to understand the gravity of the situation we are in. Now, I don't fault restaurants, for instance. I think Governor Cuomo made a hasty move there in shutting indoor dining at the restaurants, because the restaurants in New York City have been complying with the law. In fact, it's been the virus has been spreading through these private gatherings, especially of young people,
Right.
who have not given two hoots about the virus and think they'll become immune by just catching it. And that's where the problem is, not at the restaurants. I think things like restaurants and bars, etc., have been maintaining very strict protocols, which is good, which means everybody is disciplined. The managements have been doing a great job. So I don't think there was a need for it. But if a virus gets out of control, as it seems to be doing in New York and New Jersey, then sometimes you may have to take that terrible decision of a complete lockdown again, which will destroy permanently many of the small businesses. And therefore, it's so important for the young people who are out there, and anybody else who believes that you don't have to wear the mask, you don't have to social distance whatsoever, that you're immune. Please don't think that way. You can't think that way. It's a matter of, we're all in this together. If there's another lockdown, it's going to be terrible. I think Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, has already emphasized that enough.
In case there is a shutdown, of course, there'll be a huge impact on the economy. Do you think a stimulus package that they have been working on for so many months now, will it be enough to alleviate us from that economic crisis, or we need multiple of these stimulus packages?
Yeah, good question, and you already gave the answer. We are going to need multiple versions of this. A stopgap arrangement is fine, but until the vaccine is taken and taken by and administered to enough of the population, which is still, resistant to being vaccinated, you won't have that herd immunity. And that herd immunity, at any rate, is going to take a few months, in my opinion. We're not going to get it. I think Dr. Anthony Fauci has said it today, that herd immunity will not be reached until the third quarter at the very earliest, third quarter of 2021. So until that happens, and if there are complete lockdowns, a total lockdown again in certain places, That means no work. That means no economy. That means no business. So what do? You need more stimulus. You need more relief. And that means people are going to have to be paid again just for staying home through no fault of their own. But if there is a mandate at the state level or at the national level, all right, we're going to lock down so we get rid of this virus once and for all, while everybody's getting vaccinated to bring in that herd immunity, there will have to be more stimulus for sure.
I just have a couple of questions left here for you. Just talking more about the economy and this stimulus package and its impact. When we're looking at the impact the stimulus package could have or couldn't have, when we're looking at the states, especially, do states have that kind of assets or perhaps money to help these small businesses, to help these people that have food insecurity issues right now, or to just help that common man that's suffering right now? Would the states be able to actually do that, or there needs to be federal funding coming into each and every state of this country?
Yeah, I fear states will not have enough. They're going to run out of money. All of them are already in dire financial straits. I mean, maybe the big ones like Texas and, maybe Florida and a couple of other states. New Jersey has been weathering the storm. New York is in deep trouble because New York City itself is a ghost town. There's only 10% occupancy of office spaces over there. So many states across the country. Then there are many states which depend entirely upon something like agriculture or, factories, meat processing plants, for instance, in Kentucky and those places where you have chicken factories and, that type of thing, poultry farms and all the rest of it. There are going to be many, many people that will suffer, many states that are not funded well to weather this kind of storm. And the only source for any financial package, for any financial relief, for rescue, is the federal government. The federal government does have an arsenal at its disposal. It can bolster the economy. It can afford to go into debt. Okay, the federal government, if people understand economics and how it works, the federal government can afford to go into debt. It can fund the states and bring them out of this morass, as it were.
So you're basically saying that the U.S. government right now is able to help this economic crisis, that there's enough, say, money in the U.S. government right now that can actually get us out of this economic crisis?
100% there is. And there is a lot of corporate money out there. There are trillions of dollars lying out there within the federal system being circulated to bring in money for the corporations themselves. So there's a lot of liquidity in the federal government, and any economist will tell you that the federal government must step in. The federal government has the capacity, and it's only the U.S. government. I mean, if let's take the UK, for instance. The UK has been already in a lockdown again in areas like London, etc. They have a lockdown, a complete lockdown again, and the federal government is able to fund the population over there.
Right.
They're actually paying them 75% of their salaries, which is great. And we are the richest country on earth. The United States still is the richest country on earth. We can fund ourselves. We can actually help fund other countries that are in dire straits as well. So I see no reason why the federal government shouldn't just step in. And I think all of this is a political bloc in Washington, D.C. That's it. If Mitch McConnell, if the Republicans say yes, if the Democrats are also willing to give leeway, we're going to have no problem. We'll be able to sail through this, actually, very quickly and peacefully.
Do you think we need an executive order perhaps signed for a stimulus package?
You can't, money being allocated, money being sent out to states, money being sent out for situations like this must pass legislation. That's the law. An executive order can only do something stopgap, bring money from here to there. So if there's a federal program administered by the federal government that has funds, such as that's what Donald Trump did, and he gave some more additional COVID relief, $300 or $400, a week for 6 weeks, and that was a stopgap arrangement. He took it from FEMA funds and then sent it for those who needed it in the unemployment numbers, and that's what he did. So that's what an executive order in a situation like this could do, is bring temporary relief, a stopgap relief, until legislatively funds can be allocated. Because money must be appropriated. Government money must be appropriated by Congress. If there's a decision to fund something new, to fund something where you bring relief, for instance, or you want to fund some kind of project, that has to go through a congressional and Senate process, because it is Congress, it is the legislature which decides where federal money goes generally for anything. If there is money already allocated to a federal program, then an executive order works to move that money over here to help where it's needed immediately. But the president does not have the authority to just tell the Federal Reserve, okay, give me trillions of dollars and let's pump it into the economy. He can't do that.
What do you think is going to be the path for President-elect Joe Biden when you're looking at this economic crisis, when you're looking at what's happening across the nation? Where do you think he is going to be very, very important at?
At his bipartisan outreach. He's going to be able to, if there's anybody who can reach out to the other side across the aisle and say, look, let's have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about this. We got to do this. Mitch McConnell, let's do this. I'm telling you right now, I'll give you credit. Let's go ahead and come up with an agreement and do it. Biden will do that. Joe Biden is the kind of man who would say, I want to thank Mitch McConnell. He stood up. He came up to me. He'll give him credit. He's that kind of a man. So I expect Biden will be doing a lot of this diplomacy. He can also be a firm man when he has to, but I think you're going to see a lot more of him being this generous individual who will just reach out as a friend and expect them as friends to help the Americans.
Just two more questions here for you. You know, today we heard the news that President-elect Joe Biden may nominate Pete Buttigieg for the transport secretary. Pete Buttigieg, of course, was his rival just last year, a couple of months ago, was against him and then became his friend afterwards. What kind of a message is this sending, and what do you have to say about his nomination?
I think it's a good pick. I think Pete Buttigieg has a very good future. Joe Biden said that after Buttigieg conceded, as a matter of fact. And in fact, if you remember at one of the events where Joe Biden was addressing a rally, Pete Buttigieg came up on stage, and Joe Biden referred to him in a very affectionate manner, saying something like, I don't have my son, Beau, with me, his son who passed away, but I do have Pete Buttigieg, something to that effect, where he referred to Buttigieg as being like his son. And I think it was very nice, very poignant moment at that time. I had at one point expected Pete Buttigieg to be considered for the role of vice president, actually. And because I think we've broken this whole barrier now of, gays and all the rest of it in America. And I think that would have been, I had quite expected first early on during the process of searching for a vice presidential candidate that Pete Buttigieg would have been considered, and he would have been very good. But I think as transportation secretary, he'll be great. He's young. He has a lot of energy. He has shown himself as a great mayor in his small town over there. And he's shown a lot of spunk, a lot of intelligence, actually, and a lot of class in the way he carries himself. I think he will make a splendid Secretary of Transportation.
And he'll also be, the first openly gay member of the cabinet, and I think that sends a huge message across.
Yep,
Do you
absolutely.
think his confirmation will be difficult?
Well, there will be all kinds of questions asked, but unless he has any skeletons in his closet, I don't expect he will meet much opposition.
Definitely.
He will do pretty well, yeah.
And finally, my last question to you has to be, what is your prediction for the next few weeks that's coming up? Things keep on changing on a daily basis, so how are you looking at it?
I think President Trump will continue to challenge the validity of the election. He has already said that and indicated that he'd like to go to Congress when the new Congress convenes, and he'd like to have them say no. You guys will. He'd like to request them to decide who has won the presidency. And that's a totally long shot. In fact, an impossible shot, in my opinion. But he will still go all the way to the end. And he will not show up. He may not show up at the inauguration. If he does, I will be pleasantly surprised. Joe Biden is going to get down to work on his very first day as soon as he's sworn in. I'm expecting on the very day he is sworn in, a couple of executive orders being signed in terms of interim relief if we don't have a relief package until then. If not, there will be some executive orders on the very first day, if not the first day, the second day at least, because he's already said that there won't be any big inaugural balls or anything like that where people gather. So he will sign a few executive orders to reverse many of the things that happened early on in the Trump presidency, such as the Muslim ban and many others, the DACA situation, all that. There'll be a lot of reversals of what were signed under Donald Trump. So that's what I expect in the next few weeks.
Well, here's to hoping the best for our nation. And, it is time to heal. So I hope we all heal together. Thank you so much for your time here on ITV Gold.
Thank you once again for having me.